Eugenie Sage.
Mr Speaker, we had the Deputy Prime Minister talking about economic security, but what National fails to understand is that if you want economic security, you need environmental security. Because on Planet Key, you have a very hostile government in terms of the environment. On Planet Key, you have lots of golf courses. But on Planet Key, the rivers are either identified for giant irrigation schemes, like the mega expensive, mega risky Ruataniwha scheme, which the government ministers are trying to foist on Hawke's Bay, trying to encourage the Hawke's Bay Regional Council to burden their ratepayers with an $88 million debt for that scheme. So those rivers would either be identified for irrigation, hydro generation, or they'd be dirty. Because, Mr Speaker, on Planet Key, wild nature is not to be valued for its own sake. It's not valued as a place that you can spend time with friends and families. On Planet Key, wild nature is something that you encourage large corporates to exploit, whether that's through risky deep-sea oil drilling, doing coal mines on conservation land, or manipulating our rivers, reducing their flows and increasing the pollution burden. Mr Speaker, Mr Brownlee talked about the Darfield dairy plant, the Fonterra's new dairy processing plant. There will be jobs at that plant, but they will be at the expense of the Waimakariri and Rakaia rivers. They'll be at the expense of water quality in our aquifers, which people depend on for drinking. So, Mr Speaker, on Planet Key, the Minister for the Environment doesn't even bother to issue a press release about the Ministry's latest report on recreational water quality, about whether our beaches and rivers are fit for recreational and summertime swimming. That's because the news is bad. So the government simply lets the Ministry upload it quietly to its website and bury it. But at least the Ministry is honest when it says in those river report cards, and I quote, "There are many freshwater swimming spots which should be avoided." And the Green Party analysed that data, and of 160 river sites that were monitored for recreational water quality nationwide, 52% of those sites were unsafe for swimming because the water quality was graded poor or very poor. And another 28% were only graded fair, so there was a risk of illness. Mr Speaker, the national ministers don't care about that. We promote our country as 100% pure and 100% Middle Earth. But to swim in our rivers, the birthright of Kiwi kids, you can't do it in the majority of the rivers that the Ministry for the Environment monitored. Those kids can't drop off a tree into a pool without the risk of getting sick. Only 20% of our rivers that are monitored by MFE for recreation make the grade. That is appalling, and that's because the national government regards nature as something to exploit for irrigation and dairying development. And that's because National is missing in action when it comes to strong policies and sensible policies to clean up our rivers. It's just missing in action. Because, Mr Speaker, if we want clean, fishable, swimmable rivers, we need to get serious about controlling the land uses that cause that pollution runoff. In Rotorua, the Regional Council has recognised that we need to phase out dairying in the Rotorua Lake catchment, but National refuses to recognise that there are other rivers, other lakes where that needs to happen. National will throw a few $1 million at Te Waihora, Lake Ellesmere, and expect that to clean up the lake, but it will do nothing about encouraging regulation of land uses in the catchment of that lake to improve water quality. We haven't had any national standards to prevent stock having access to rivers and streams. We've got a toothless national policy statement on fresh water, which means that regional councils can avoid adopting clean water standards until 2030. We've got no national standards which set limits for pollutants in waterways and set some clear standards for clean water. This government is missing in action as far as clean water and clean rivers are concerned. We've got no national standards on nutrient limits. And yet, when we've got a regional council and an environment court which on plans like the One Plan and the Manawatu seek to put in place rules that will control intensive dairy and sheep farming, that will seek to protect water quality by having riparian planting rules, What does the government do? It makes sure that the Department of Conservation isn't involved in defending the Environment Court decision at the High Court. It leaves it to non-profit organisations like Fish and Game. The government won't take responsibility for clean water.
David Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Green Party there